go ahead and turn on our recording. Roberto's coming in. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be doing a little bit of dance to let people in. So if I look like I'm slightly distracted for about 1 second, that's what's going on. But first of all, thank you everybody for being here. We had 72 people sign up. So I know we're going to have a lot of people watching the recording, as well as probably people floating in as the time passes. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you, Christina, for being here. We were literally going, I think it's been 10 years. And oops, your camera froze a little bit. Uh-oh.
Me? I'm
Yep,
frozen?
it did just for a tiny bit. Yeah.
Okay, we're good now?
Hopefully, um, worst case, I can turn my camera off if that helps, but I think we're doing right. So getting started, welcome everyone. Would love to introduce Christina, but I'd love to say something. I think everybody knows I don't follow the rules when I do introductions, but I'll read what I wrote as well. But because I love getting to know everybody and also just seeing them as a whole human, one of the things that I remember the most about Christina when she was in the program and after it is she's a go-getter. She really knows what she wants and she just puts herself out there. And I have to just smile because bringing in, work with the nervous system, the heart math, and all those things into relationship coaching, and which we'll talk a little bit about, is such an important need, especially today. And so I just really love how you've shaped the way you're coaching by bringing in a lot of different perspectives, lenses, science, psychology, onto your whole person foundation. So excited to hear a little bit more about that. So I'll read the formal do thing. And I start. Christina is a ICF professional, certified, whole person certified coach, heart math mentor, relationship coach who bridges science, self-compassion, and story. She helps clients uncover the unconscious beliefs that drive self-doubt and overfunctioning. Hello. A lot of people know that one, and replace them with presence, trust, and peace. A trained practitioner of heart math, attachment theory, and Gottman method, Christina guides clients through nervous system regulation, emotional intelligence, and of course, authentic communication. Her work has supported individuals and couples in finding freedom from old patterns and cultivating relationships rooted in emotional safety and understanding. Whew, love it. Anything you want to add to that, Christina? I know it's like so fun. Isn't it always fun to hear, like, yeah, anything
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
add?
picked up I've picked up a lot of training along the way, a lot of extras, which of, those things that come into the periphery and it's like, oh, I'm curious about that and have come in handy. And some of them recently, I think it's ongoing. Like I've been doing this for, like you said, 10 years.
Yeah,
And I think there's constant content to learn and pick up to help people in the very best way.
absolutely. So I'd love,
I'm
oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm curious to know if the audience is, who is the audience? Are we all coaches in school, in training? Is it a broad brush?
It is a broad brush from new season people in the CTW, people that are not in CTW. Yeah,
Great.
it's open to everyone. Yeah,
Thanks for having me. It's really nice to see you, Ferosha.
thank you. So I'd love to know, because usually when someone goes into a niche, there's something that sparked them.
Mm.
Got you, what life experience or problem you saw out in the world or whatever was true for you got you into relationship coaching.
Mm. Well, I've learned when I studied with you, I was going through a separation and divorce. And that turns everything upside down. And what I've learned and continue to learn is that life can be quite okay. Everything's okay. Work's good. This is good. That is good. When our relationship, our intimate relationship is rocky, unhappy, uneasy, traumatizing, it impacts every area of life. And that piece about relationship often leads to the self-love topic that I get into. So, yes, in relationships, we can learn about how to communicate better and pick up tools that help us learn to love one another better. But most importantly, that starts here. So it's both. But relationship coaching for me was all is has been all about, you need to find your niche. My niche was self-love when I started. But then I also, through my own experience of separation and divorce, realized where's the emotional support as I'm going through this awful event? You have all these people that help you tick the boxes, but nobody was helping with the emotional part of it. So I niched a bit into that to help people navigate relationship and separation or whatever it is. Relationships encompass so many different nuggets.
Absolutely. And you said something that really stood out, can be traumatizing,
Mm,
and I'm sure, with your background, and we always talk about this in the trauma course, that relationships are everything. And so when a big event happens, like a divorce or separation or even a new relationship, a lot of our attachments from early on or even adult attachments come into play.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. So I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about kind of how you leverage science and self-love in your approach, because I always giggle because there's the "Huh," and the science.
Mhm.
What does that look like? And
Well, it's so interesting because different people, we all respond to things differently. But this whole learning that neuroplasticity is a thing. Like we can actually change the way we respond to things and the way we think about things. And we have this feeling of wanting to do it, this desire of wanting to do it. And that is a big driver. Our why is a huge driver in what we do and choose. But there's also some little strategic tools that we can use to essentially train our brain to be in line with what our heart wants. So, my first exposure to that, I think, was Joe Dispenza. I'm reading a Joe Dispenza book, and it's like, what? You can actually program your brain to feel and think lightness and compassion and kindness as opposed to fear and respond from a place of reaction that's learned. But yeah, this concept around the ability to change our learned behavior. So it's that piece of, the heart. For me, this is all about connecting the head and the heart. That's been my coaching foundation ever since I started.
it kind of sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, is, you know, the heart's in the lead, but the head or the mind, however you want to call it, is kind of how we get to that outcome that we're really wanting.
And I also think it gets in the way,
Of course, yeah.
right? The stories that,
Retraining, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the stories we have picked up along the way, those learned responses that were either mirrored or we were told that gets in the way. And I think when we can start to hear what's going on in here, we have the ability to open up and let the heart guide the way.
I love that. Kind of reminds me of someone I was working with, and they were going through, they both, husband and wife, were very, very growth-oriented people. They were change makers in themselves. And then they realized that their respective histories were coming through in their relationship so strong that they had spent all their time processing the things that they probably needed to process with a therapist or a coach instead of trying to do the work in their own. And so, like, for the male, some of the habits that came from father that got born and trained into his brain were showing up in response to the habits that got trained by the wife from her parents. And it was just like they said, there's an entire inner community within each of us that's now at battle with each other. And so it was just really fascinating watching them go through that and being supportive. Eventually, they did find a therapist to work with. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's
what?
really, really interesting when you start to learn about why we choose who we choose.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's like because we grow up or at least move into our young adult life very often, and don't get me wrong, there are healthy role models out there and healthy relationships.
Yeah.
But when we don't witness that and we keep choosing the same person, I have a lot of that. I keep people come to me and say, I keep choosing the same person and it's not working for me. It's not what I want. Why do I do this? It's like you would never like to think in your young adult life that who you choose as your partner is essentially your mother or your father, subconsciously, that's exactly what we're choosing, is what we know.
Yeah,
So, yeah, relationships are fascinating.
I know. I feel like we could go on for hours. So I'm curious, when you have someone that comes in and maybe they're in that place where like, oh, I need to go through a divorce, but I can't, they're in the swim of the emotional field. And in those moments, how do you talk about the science or the psychology? How do you bring that into someone maybe where their brain isn't quite ready to hear those kinds of things, but yet that could be the perspective that could maybe seed some change?
Mm. I think primarily it is about helping them hear what's going on internally. Our subconscious mind and our internal thoughts are with us every minute of every day and guides our life, as does our like the nervous system and the subconscious mind are guiding everything and receiving all, internalizing all this messaging. And when I find that, and I'm sure you find this too, is that when people sit and say, well, I want to change this, it's like, well, what is this? Let's define this and what that looks like, because the mind is saying, I want this thing or I don't want this thing, but is that even true? So it's really about helping people hear what is going on in the brain, not, for a matter of fact. And one of these things, one of these exercises or tools that I often hand out is, okay, you need to talk to yourself every day, put a note in your calendar, put a reminder, set it, and it pops up and it says, hey, for the next 2 minutes, just say whatever's going on in your mind out loud. And it's fascinating because you would never talk very often to a friend, never mind a stranger, the way that we're playing this tape in our head, the inner critic. So that first piece is starting to expose what's really going on in there. And also let's define what it is you actually think you want. Does that make sense?
It does. It's almost kind of back to the heart, what the heart wants and how the head's participating in the moment and
Yeah.
bringing that conscious awareness to the patterns and then maybe
Yes.
being able to move the patterns into a different directions that support the heart. Did I get it?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I love that. And I always giggle because, I always think about when we talk about the heart, we're kind of talking about metaphorically, but I know there's a lot with heart math that you could probably also bring to life. Would you be willing to share a little bit more of, so the heart's like my heart wants, but maybe kind of bring that into that
Yeah,
realm?
heart math is very interesting because there are all these, the heart wants what the heart wants and the heart knows best. It's all those sayings.
Yeah.
But the heart has, heart math exposed this science that shows that the heart actually has its own brain and has something like 40,000 neurons that send messaging, more messaging to the brain than the brain sends to the heart, that the brain sends. And then HeartMath also talks about this energetic field that our heart has. It's why we walk into a room and we're sensitive to people's energy. And HeartMath says, hey, that comes from this very energetic heart. And when HeartMath also speaks to the nervous system and whether we're in, the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system. And when we're in that sympathetic nervous system, we're heightened and we're functioning more from amygdala, which is, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And when we're parasympathetic, we've got access to our prefrontal cortex, rational, reasoning, calm, logical thinking. And HeartMath talks, it's all about foundationally about heart focused breathing, is what they call it.
Yeah.
So that's, slowing your breath and deepening your breath just a little, still comfortable. And the science or the premise behind it is that at any time you can call on and use heart focused breathing, even when you're in a meeting or in a heated conversation, to try to calm everything down because that breath slows the heart rate and gives us more access to that parasympathetic nervous system, which is calm, and the prefrontal cortex. So it's really interesting stuff. And when they also really talk about, which what we touched on, is it gives us access to the wisdom that lives in our heart. So it's really fascinating stuff.
So it's way beyond the metaphor.
Yes. The metaphors exist for this reason.
It's interesting because, as an adult learner, sometimes people will learn from the metaphor, the image. Some people will just learn from the facts. And I think sometimes some of the depth and the science gets diluted by the metaphors because we'll remember the metaphor, it becomes more sticky than the science. And just, reattaching that could be really helpful, I think, for a lot of people to trust maybe doing breath work or, being more embodied and working with the nervous system approach, which
Mhm.
sometimes, and we had a conversation the other day is using the word woo, you know, in itself can make people turn away, but it's such a common thing if someone's not used to maybe bringing their body or their breath. So, yeah.
Mhm.
So I'd love to hear, because I'd asked you about a case study. Would you be willing to kind of share, like maybe a scenario in confidential ways, of maybe someone that came to you, what they were looking for, kind of what were some of the patterns in their thinking, things that kind of clued you into what you might do, and kind of a little bit of illustrating your process, if you would.
Hmm.
And I'm sure they're all different each time.
Yeah. One that comes to mind right away was um, a 60-year-old lady who is very successful. She had a great job, career that she loved, and a great relationship with her children. And she just came in and she's like, I just feel like something's missing in my life. There's this meh about it. And I'm looking, you're looking from the outside going, you've got an amazing life. So this tool of helping her hear what's going on in her head. I handed this tool to her and said, let's just start to try to understand and hear, just to notice how do you talk to yourself? What's playing in the background? And it took a good 5 weeks. She came in and she said, I figured it out. She said, every morning I wake up and I hear, we'll say her name is Susan. Oh, Susan. I'm like, okay. And she said, that is attached to my mother. And she had a very critical mother. She was never good enough, never enough for her mother. And it was like she carried this mother cloud with her when she heard those words. And as soon as she heard that and noticed it, her life completely changed. It changed in the sense that she goes, Christina, I no longer sit at night and drink wine and smoke. I no longer have this heavy cloud over me. I see the beauty in like she was absolutely, I have goosebumps right now just talking about it. Just light. It was pretty fascinating. Just two little words, Oh, Susan, and what they were attached to. It's massive.
So it sounded like this person had the ability to notice those patterns and the ability to kind of link them to her mother.
Once she noticed it, yes.
Yep, when she saw it. Yeah. So what
Yeah.
happens when you have someone who's very embedded in their identity and maybe it's even blocking them, like we talked a little bit earlier, the mind can do such a wonderful thing. What would you do in that moment?
It's one powerful question over and over again. When somebody says something, I ask, is that true?
Mhm.
Well, yes, it's true because, I've got all this historical evidence that proves to me that it's true and has me living in the story. And then I ask again, do you know that to be absolutely true? And that question, I mean, it's in my back pocket all the time. It changes everything because that's the undoing or at least exposing the lies of the learned behavior. Does that make sense?
It does. So it sounds like if I'm giving you my excuse, then you're going to say, is that true? And then I give
Mhm.
you another excuse and they say, is that true? And so you kind of just almost unspiral the belief framework.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always like that. Is there another time it could be different?
The question?
Yeah, I like that question. Is there another time in your life when it was different? Just because sometimes in our childhood we
Oh,
haven't been shaped or conditioned as much. So,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
like the laser focus of, is that true? Is that
hmm
true?
Yeah, and some of those primary questions that I learned from you, right? It's when in your life have you experienced something similar, right? Or when in your future might you experience something like that? So, yeah, the questions that, essentially open the door are powerful. But that one question, we believe our stories to be true. It is our truth. And when we can look at it and say, is that even true? And almost always the answer when we, nudge it around is no, I don't know it to be true. All that we know to be true is right here and right now, right? We don't know that it's going to look like that, what tomorrow's going to look like, or what that circumstance or situation is going to look like. So it can
We're all,
get a little woo-woo there, but I'm down with woo-woo.
yeah, and I like calling it woo-woo. It's shaped to something. So we've been talking about kind of the heart and the head. Um, we tapped a little bit into self-love and kind of being a driving force. But you've also used words like self-compassion, self-trust. You know, Sometimes I feel like we can kind of all smush them all together. Oh, self-love is self-compassion, self-trust. But it
Mhm.
also feels like there's like differentiation between those pieces and different ways to kind of bring them into perspective and into play in a coaching session.
Mhm.
Would you maybe want to elaborate, please?
Yeah. Well, first I'd like to define what is love. What is having love for self look like? Like what is it? Because it's not, affirmations on the wall are great.
Yeah,
Taking time to relax in the bathtub, great. Not necessarily self-love. I believe the foundation of self-love is goes back to what we've been talking about. It's how we talk to ourselves. And when we do that with empathy and compassion, as we would for a friend or someone we care about, someone we love, that is the essence of self-love. There's even to this day, I have moments where I had one the other day where this woman was highlighting criticism. And I was like, no, I'm not critical. Like, I'm not critical to myself. I love myself. I coach this stuff. I know this stuff. And then I walk away and I'm like, oh, I just heard a little thing in there that could be perceived as criticism. Right. Got it. Notice. So, self-love is all of those pieces, but fundamentally, it is how we talk to ourselves inside in our head that we are automatically listening to and are completely unaware of.
love that. It makes me curious because we had talked a little bit earlier in the introduction, and we've been talking about relationships, but then there's the relationship that we have with ourselves, and you're, reflecting on, check that self-talk. But what about the person that is just, I always, in my word, I call them approval-holics. That's why I always, anytime I hear like, yeah, yeah, yep, yep. And that's a form of self, sabotage if we're always trying to prove ourselves, whether it's to ourselves, the world. And I think that persists in any relationship that we're involved with. Sometimes we're trying to be seen as valuable, find a way to belong. Would you like to maybe elaborate kind of on the bigger relationship field, what that looks like in your world, and then maybe some ideas on how to support someone that was in the prove-aholic lane? Or I can't remember the exact word that we used. Um, over functioning. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's important to look at, where does that come from? And this question of another one of these powerful questions is, where did I learn this? But how is this, more importantly, how is this serving me? Right? I'm doing this thing and what am I getting from it? And when you talk about what is the offering around this, I think the offering are alternative to needing to prove, we could get into that. That goes, I think, very deeply into this space of needing to be seen and heard and loved from primary caregivers in our formative years. But I think this essentially comes down to acceptance. accepting that I am enough, accepting that I am perfectly enough and doing my best right here, right now. And when we truly accept that, it doesn't mean we're not wanting to grow or achieve or do things, but this need to prove that either we're right or that we're good enough is causing that is that disconnect between the head and the heart. If we sit in a place of pure acceptance of where we're at, knowing we can grow and change, knowing that we want to, but genuinely accepting it, that is so self-loving.
It almost seems like there's a guidepost for getting to that heightened level of self-love and almost self-respect in these situations.
I think there's a lot of guideposts
Yeah.
because as and I think everybody here today, we're obviously doing the work and in the work, and
Mhm.
it's multi-layered. I was told once it's like an onion, right? It's like layer, 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 so many little pieces. And again, I think that's about acceptance. I'm learning what I'm learning, I'm given what I'm given, and I'm doing my very best with it.
I'm going to invite the group that's here. If you have a question, if you could put a little note in the chat and then I'll call on people. But I'm going to ask a question of Christina that I think will resonate with a lot of people here is relationships. When we're talking about them, they can be pretty influential, like just even as the coach to hold that container. Has there ever been a situation where um, maybe you were working with someone and you could really feel the feels? And how did you stay in your lane and hope, stay with them in that window of tolerance, keeping the ability to hold the space without getting pulled into their story or their state?
Hmm.
I get asked this every time I teach.
Yeah.
Any tips were great. Yeah.
I have to be, well, I'm always honest, but I have to be honest here. I have had two moments where I have shed tears with clients. And, it's not, there's a difference between codependency and empathy. And when we have empathy for people, to me, it means that we've walked in their shoes or can walk in their shoes. And that's not realistic. I have no idea what, your and anybody here, what their life journey has been. But when I sit and truly listen, and this is the beautiful gift I think this coaching practice has given me, is to truly listen means that I've turned off all of my assumptions, all of my stories, all of my solutions, and I'm genuinely holding space and listening. And when that's the case, you are there with that person. You do have the ability to empathize, even if you haven't experienced it. I haven't experienced that certain type of grief, but I know grief. So, and I don't think, I look back on those two moments where I had tears. Those people felt so seen. And it was not me attaching and glomming on to this, hey, I'm taking on your feelings and taking them home. But it was just being really present in the moment, which I think is quite beautiful. I don't
And
know if that answered your question.
what did you say?
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I mean, what I'm hearing is being present and managing that you're not taking in the story or letting the state, but actually because we're so resonating together, especially in a coaching relationship, that if tears come, it's because out of pure connection, not I'm going down the tube with you,
Mhm.
I'm not in your
Mhm.
story now, I'm not thinking about my own experience of it, and allowing your humanity to shine through.
And I think that's the essence of coaching, right? Is to actually genuinely wholeheartedly listen. Because when you're in the role of coach, you're listening to these words in order to understand what to ask next to take, to potentially shine light on a door. And the only way you can genuinely know what to ask next or what to say next is to genuinely listen. And every single person and the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that I've chatted with, everybody has that same need, which is to be seen and to be heard in this lifetime. And that's what we get the privilege of doing as coaches. It's pretty beautiful.
It's interesting because I have a part of me, I'll say, that sometimes, in coaching, the idea is, where do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to go? And sometimes that will bring the coach's attention to, we gotta get them somewhere. I hear that language all the time. We got to get them somewhere, and what you're sharing is something I totally believe in. It's like we're there to listen. And when we listen, just that ability to be there and help them to feel that sense of being seen, heard, and respected, that on a whole level helps them to kind of reclaim, or I should say, remember their wholeness.
Hmm.
And they become a lot more generative when we give them that space. Plus, we're also getting a lot more information on, some of those patterns and things that we now maybe know were the blocks or the opportunities to move the conversation forward. But that's
Hmm.
contradictory to the get them somewhere, the
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah.
And it's hard because as humans we're so trained to, we got to move the needle, but sometimes we've got to really slow down, welcome, embrace, and then what happens after that becomes the organic, natural folding, and people are pretty darn resourceful.
Hmm. It's funny. I have people come in and they'll sit down and they'll, talk for 30 minutes.
Yep.
And they're like, I'm sorry, I'm talking so much. And I'm like, no, keep talking because you are giving me so much to work with here. It's brilliant. And I really do feel like when we, like I said, genuinely listen, there, we can step, like you mentioned, where here we are, where are we going to go? How am I going to help you see it, get there? Why? When we actually listen, that what to do next or what to shine the light on next always surfaces when we're genuinely listening to who we're talking with.
So I'm curious, are there particular patterns that you notice that are, for people, what they're coming to you for, or particular blocks that they're getting stuck in that you recognize once they start sharing?
I talk a lot lately about what I'm calling the epidemic of not enoughness. And I think that two of the things show up either I'm not enough or I'm too much. Constantly and consistently, those two things show up with people. And again, that goes back to that, the core learned behavior. But there, when we touch on this work of not enoughness or too muchness, we can call on Brené Brown and her beautiful research around shame and, having learning and essentially self-love, right? It's like, wait a second here. Who told me that I needed to feel this way? Who told me that I need to show up like this? Who told me this was, no, wait, I get to define this. I get to define how I show up. I get to define what I feel, what I think, and can undo those learned internal beliefs.
I have a curious question, and then it looks like Kathy's looking for a book recommendation for HeartMath.
I,
And then I'm going to open up, invite some more shy ones to show up here. But what do you think has, like, if you were to roll back to when you were a newer coach, just getting started, what do you think enabled you to keep growing yourself? And what do you notice is different about your style now than maybe it was even 5 years ago or 7 years?
I have always been a big heart, all about love, all about, have always had a little woo-woo in me. I've always been a big-hearted and people pleaser, which, that that says a lot. I think something that's changed me significantly or changed in the way that I coach now is that piece that you actually just touched on, right? It was in the beginning very focused on where to get them, how to help them get to that next thing or where they want to go. And now it is much more about holding space for people and being present. It's calmer. And, you know, what has changed significantly lately, and I can't overlook it, is 13 months ago, I fell 50 feet down a cliff and I'm lucky to,
Oh.
am lucky to be here today. And it has shined a massive light on the nervous system and how much our nervous system dictates everything. So while I've often and historically talked about breathing and getting quiet in the mind, I now understand, like I said, there's this spotlight shined on how much our nervous system has an impact on everything. So the genuine need now today or change in how I coach today has a lot to do with pure acceptance of where we're at and just calming everything down.
How about a book recommendation for Kathy?
Yeah, so there are two HeartMath books. I just wanted to look up the name because Heart Intelligence by Doc Childry. He's one of the founders of HeartMath or the founder of HeartMath. But if you go to their website, there's a really cool thing there, actually. So if you go to the HeartMath website, they have this heart coherence tool, and it's this little monitor you clip on and you don't need the monitor because you can get the HeartMath app, so book or app, but the app helps you practice HeartMath breathing, and you can pace the app to your own personal breath and you can push any kind of little exercise that you want. And if you don't have the sensor, you can use your fingerprint on your camera lens while in the app, and it shows your heart coherence or your heart rhythm. And what's fascinating is, when I first started doing this, I'm like, I'm good, I'm calm, I'm a coach, I'm amazing. And I get on and realize, oh, wow, it takes me a good 2 minutes to get into coherence.
Mm.
So it's really interesting when you use that app and can see what you're doing, see what your body's saying and understanding what it takes to have access to that parasympathetic nervous system.
Maybe that should be a requirement for new coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, have we arrived yet? Have we arrived? Yeah, I took years ago, I've taken a lot of their classes and I did a group did a big workshop in Portland, and
Ah,
it was the first time I'd been exposed to it. And I want to guess maybe 10, 12 years ago. I can't, everything's a blur at this point. And I remember sitting in this room and everybody in the room, they weren't coaches. They were just people from all kinds of places. And we're all doing our heart breathing, everything. And it was like we all walked away like in love with each other. It's
yeah,
really awesome. And I'm like, I don't know you, but I just feel so relaxed and at peace. And I can be myself. And then from that experience, I was like, all right, well, I got to check this stuff out. Um,
yeah,
they do really beautiful work, really
yeah.
beautiful. So I'd love to invite, is there anybody here that has a question for Christina that would be willing to pop on and say hello? Rebecca, is that you? Do you want to jump in?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Do you have a question for Christina? And your camera came on, so I was like, did you have a question?
Oh, no. I had been on and then I was coordinating something here. So sorry. But I love this. I don't have a specific question, but this has been fabulous.
Yeah. Anybody else have a question? I don't know, friends. Kathy's asking if that is the link.
Yes, I'm just responding.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I actually have some questions in my back pocket, of course.
Of course you do.
So when I first started coaching, I did a lot around, my very first niche was wellness coaching. And it was fascinating because what happened was they would come to me, primarily I got labeled as a weight loss coach. And of course, as you probably guess, it was, you know, people wanted to work on diet, exercise, and I wanted to work on love, stress management, kind of curing the things that were underneath it. And at the time, I just didn't have the awareness because I was more in the health arena and I wasn't really looking at the whole person. Um, but in those moments, I was really finding that what they needed was to kind of do some healing relationally with themselves and other people, because there was a lot of people that, society, family, partners, or had ideas what they should look like, be like. And so it was a lot of that mix up of my identity and who I want to be. Where do you feel that self-love penetrates outside of relationships? And could you give some examples? Or I should say the lack of.
The lack of self-love and how it affects your life outside of relationships. Oh boy. Well, it breeds that what I call that epidemic of not enoughness. And, we can touch on one thing that would be an example would be confidence or lack thereof. A lot of people speak to wanting to be confident. And I look at that and go, okay, well, that is when we love self, confidence is a part of that. Like you said, self-trust, self-empathy, self-compassion, confidence. And when we when you have self-love, you also understand boundaries. And when you have self-love, you also understand, or love for self, you also understand that when people say things to you or do things, when you hold this sense of self-love and knowing, we know that that's not about us. And I can receive your message, I can hear your message, but I'm not taking it on because I know it's not mine. And it may poke me, and I can look at that and understand that, which is helpful. But what you're experiencing and tossing my way right now is not about me or my worthiness. And so I think that's huge in life. It's like when somebody honks at you, or the barista is unkind, or the server gets your order wrong, or your boss says something requesting more from you. These aren't definite, these things don't define our worthiness. So that self-love piece, it's not just about relationship, it's about how we walk through life. And it sure makes it lighter, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. And I think most people don't figure that out till they're probably in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, sometimes way beyond that, because that conditioning is so strong.
Hmm.
So it looks like Sky. Um, Sky wrote, apologies, I would be asking a question, woke up a little under the weather. So I think that might have been a private message to me. I'm still trying to figure out Zoom. Well, thanks, Sky. I know you're my question lady. So I'm curious, like for someone that is wanting to work with relationships, like what would you suggest for them? Like if someone says, oh, I'm interested in maybe bridging out to relationship coaching. And I know some people, think of it intimate relationships. Some people think about it within the workplace relationships, like interpersonal in that domain. Like what is if you were to go back and say, this is what really helped me to be amazing, what would you say?
The first thing that comes to mind, and I'll trust that, is understanding attachment theory. Yeah, attachment theory was profound for me. So I will never forget picking up on a Friday night the book Attached by Amir Levine. And I closed it on Saturday morning, finished the book. It was like this book was written about it was my relationship. It was what? So understanding attachment theory when it comes to relationships is super helpful, because those patterns are so easily identifiable. When you have somebody saying, I keep dating the same guy or I keep dating the same woman, and you have an anxious and an avoidant situation going on, it's oil and water, and it often is on repeat. So I think attachment theory is a really great nugget to look at when you're looking at relationship coaching. And then the other thing that comes to mind, there are two things. The Gottman Institute, they have, I mean, their whole process around, and let me just share, I don't know if anybody here is aware of Gottman, but
Are you
They
going to share a screen?
created, pardon?
Or were you going to share a screen or just share?
No, I'm just going to share it. That,
Okay.
yeah, the Gottmans created this little house on a university campus, and they put couples in the house, and they had heart rate monitors on them and cameras everywhere. And it would take about 45 minutes for the couples to settle into, oh, I'm not on camera, like I'm on camera, so I need to be at my best. And then in about 45 minutes, they got comfortable and were themselves. And they have 40 plus years of this data of thousands of couples, and can sit with a couple and know right away if that couple's going to make it or if they're going to break. And they all of their content is based off what they call the four horsemen of the apocalypse, criticism, these four different types of characteristics or behaviors in relationship that break relationship. So if you're looking at relationship coaching stuff, yes, attachment theory, yes, the Gottmans, they have a great website, great blog, great courses. I've taken a couple of their courses. They're fantastic. And then the deeper layer is understanding that imago theory with Harville and Helen Hendricks. And that book is called Getting the Love You Want. And that is a really deep look at why we're drawn to who we're drawn. So I'd say those are three really significant pieces that I've learned about and I use and that come up a lot. Yes, I will send the link.
Beautiful. It's interesting because you're making me go like, we should have a book club.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I'm curious because I know you've got your own resources. You've got your self-care Sundays, I think it is, and your self-love shift podcast. Maybe
Yeah.
talk a little bit about those resources for others to kind of learn more about you too.
Thanks. Yeah. I do a self-care Sunday series, which is every other week, where I hop on Sunday mornings with just like this. I'm on Zoom, and it's for about 20 minutes. And I find in my coaching, when you're a coach, you're not supposed to share your opinion. You're asking questions, strategic questions to shine the light. And there are the reasons why you ask certain questions, because you've got this body of knowledge over here, which is like, you need to know this. This is going to help you. So in my self-care Sundays and in my podcast, which you mentioned, the self-love shift, is an opportunity for me to share what I've learned about certain topics like expectations, um, communication, not enoughness, curiosity. So I expand on tools and reasons, share the knowledge behind some of the things that I essentially talk about, but don't get to talk about in a session, right? And both of those things were birthed after my fall off the cliff.
Hmm.
So I was forced to be more quiet and at home, and I couldn't, I was stuck at home for quite a few months. And I'm like, you know what? The universe has handed this to me for a reason. And I think one of it is to create more of a community and share some more of this knowledge that I've picked up along the way, because I think it is really worth believing and walking through life knowing that we are enough right here, right now.
Well, I can only imagine what that fall was like. And I'm also in deep appreciation that you've been able to turn that, sounds like a very scary experience,
Mhm.
to use it for good for you and others.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'm curious, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would want to throw out to the group? Anything we missed?
I think it's been a pretty great conversation. I wanted to really drive home my whole messaging around we are enough
We
right
are.
here now. Yeah, yeah. And, self-acceptance. And I think that other topic about having compassion for self, right? And encouraging self and talking to self inside and outside, how we do to people that we love or to perfect strangers. We're sometimes kinder to perfect strangers than we are to ourselves. That's crazy making. We're stuck with ourselves for the rest of our lives, every minute of every day. So yeah, I think we covered some great material.
Beautiful. So it looks like Joy said, what is the third part? I'm thinking the third resource. Was that the Imago?
Yes, that was, I'm just popping in this other link here. That was the third part that I mentioned was the book, Getting the Love You Want by Harville and Helen Hendricks. And that is the Imago work.
There's another book that we talk about in the trauma class. It's called Mother Hunger,
Oh,
uh,
I haven't heard of that.
which is another, I mean, we could probably make a whole library of books to the two of us.
Yeah.
But kind of looking at from more of the lens of how our experiences with our mothers leave us in these places, just a different lens, but things.
That's so interesting, Ferocia, because this topic that has been coming up a lot in the last month, I find like there are themes in, especially in my weeks, it'll be like there's a theme of what the clients are bringing to the table. But the thing that's been coming up lately is what I've been calling the mother wound.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I'm going to go there because you know me. Um, in our crazy world, I know you're in Canada, so down here it's a little rocky, relationally rocky between a lot of people. Do you have any words of wisdom or perspective on, maybe bringing a little more love across the spectrum? Maybe just people to people as a whole.
Mm, I think it goes down to that listening piece. Listening. I published a podcast a couple weeks ago called Words Are Just Words. And if we could actually walk through life, believing that, hearing words for what they are, and getting curious. I think curiosity is such a powerhouse. But to get curious about when somebody says something and maybe it feels like an attack or an opinion or unsolicited advice, if we don't attach it to self and we actually use the tool, which is curiosity, boy, is that freeing.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy.
Words cure and words do other things if we're attached. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Thank
just
you.
going to pop in the link to my podcast.
Perfect.
But yeah, I think that if we could all take that away and not take things as a personal attack or something that we need to wear or something that ultimately defines us. It's like, tell me more about that, you know?
Curiosity.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes have this little tiny mission that someday will probably come to fruition where it's almost like a lot of the skills that we learn, develop, embody as a coach could be life skills for a lot of people.
Hmm.
All right, my dear one, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Really
you so much
appreciate you
for
being
this
here.
conversation. Yeah, it was really nice to see you and share this stuff. And you got to see how your amazing education and whole person coach training has me still doing this thing that I love 10 years later. So thank you for the foundational pieces that you handed off to me.
Thank you. Thank you for being there out in the world. We need more of you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone,
Thanks, everybody. It was a joy.
bye-bye.